So hello and welcome, Microbehunter here again, and in this episode I want to talk about 10 common beginners microscopy mistakes. Well, these mistakes I've seen quite often students make, and of course also other beginning microscopists, and some of them seem to be quite common sense problems that you should avoid, but if you're not consciously aware of them, then you might easily overlook them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to count down now all of those 10 problems in no specific order, so I'm not going to rank them in any specific order here, but I think that these problems, if you are able to identify them, then it's going to make microscopy, of course, much easier for you. So we're going to start off with problem 10, and we're going to be counting down all the way to problem number 1. So problem 10 is starting to observe a slide with a high power objectives. Okay, that's a big one. In many cases, the microscopes have already let's say the 10 times or the 40 times objective rotated in place, and sometimes beginners they start to simply continue to use those objectives that are currently rotated into position, and sometimes these are high power objectives, but that's not the objective that you're supposed to start with. You always have to start a microscopy session, a slide observation session rather, with the 4 times low power objective for several reasons. First of all, you do get the widest field of view, so you see a lot of the specimen, and therefore it gives you orientation, and you can then recenter the slide in such a way that you're able to then have a look at some certain parts that you want to look at. But it's always a good idea to get an overview first. The second reason why you should start with a low power objective is because it generally has the highest depth of field, so focusing is significantly easier, and you can use also the coarse focus knob to quickly find the focus. So generally, if a high power objective is in position, then always rotate it to the 4 times low power objective, because ultimately you're going to be much faster than trying to find the focus using the high power directly. So I think this was enough for the problem number 10. Let's move down all the way to the next one. Not centering the slide is problem number 9. And people drop the slide usually into the mechanical stage if you have a microscope that has a mechanical stage, and they completely forget about centering the slide. And yes, I have seen students in some extreme cases that actually looked at the slide label. Of course, you're not able to see anything at all. But then again, even if you have more or less centered the slide, it might not be centered enough, because some specimens are relatively small, and you might have the cover glass of your slide under the objective, but maybe not the specimen which is still smaller. So in order to center the slide properly, you should do that using the low power 4 times objective that I just mentioned before. So if you do not see anything, well, check whether you actually have something, whether the slide is centered. We move down to problem number 8. The condenser. Using the condenser for controlling the amount of light. Now, the condenser, that is an optical system that can be found beneath the stage. And the condenser has several functions, really. Sometimes it also acts as a filter holder. There's a swing out filter holder beneath in the condenser. There is also an iris diaphragm. The iris diaphragm controls the depth of field and contrast and resolution. But some people use the iris diaphragm to control light. Now, it's not completely wrong all the time to use it to control light, especially when you're at very high power and when the specimen is very dark. You might want to open the condenser simply to make a dark specimen visible at all, but that's not what the condenser diaphragm should be used for. Always make sure that you go to the maximum light level at a high magnification if it's too dark. Maybe I shouldn't have said maximum, but appropriate one rather, using the light intensity control, and only when you're at the maximum, and when this is not enough, then you should adjust the condenser appropriately. Now, usually there is also an optimal condenser setting. It is like this, that the condenser should be opened for the high power objectives, because this also increases the resolution. So ideally, the setting of the condenser and the numerical aperture, which is printed on the objective, should be correspond to each other. But you can of course close it further down to increase the depth of field and also the contrast. But you should not be using the condenser as a primary light control source. So problem number 7, we're counting down. Oh, this is a bad one, really. Using immersion oil with a non-oil, the so-called the dry objectives. This is a really bad one, and it happens all the time. It happens all the time, especially with beginning microscopists, and sometimes it's not even voluntary. Yeah. So immersion oil should only be used with a 100 times oil immersion objective, and the objective has the word oil written on top of it. And for those of you who don't know what this is, it is the oil immersion objective is made in such a way that it can be rotated directly into the immersion oil. So this means that the objective itself will be covered with immersion oil. Now, and this immersion oil has the correct refractive index. It's placed on the microscope slide, and this increases both the brightness and the resolution, but it can only be used for the oil immersion objective. And now what sometimes happens is that people use the 100 times oil immersion objective, then they lose focus a little bit, and they want to look at the specimen again using the lower power objective, let's say the 40 times objective. It's still high power actually, but it's of a lower power than the 100 times oil, of course. And then they rotate it back, and then they dip the front part of the 40 times objective into the immersion oil, and that's not good. You have to clean it away. It's not going to improve, honestly, it's not going to improve the image quality to use those dry objectives with immersion oil. It really doesn't make a lot of sense at all. And as a matter of fact, it might even damage the objective. Yeah, so you should not be doing that. I remember a talk I once had with a representative from a microscope company, and he told me that in the laboratory they actually they rotated a very expensive dry objective, non-oil objective into the immersion oil, which should not have happened. It's a very, very expensive objective, and they had to take the objective apart to clean it because some of the immersion oil actually got behind the lenses. I don't even know how this is possible. But they had to actually physically take the objective apart and give it a service and a cleaning because, somehow oil actually went into the objective itself. That's not something that you want. And if this happens with a slightly lower priced objective, then I would say, fixing it is not an option. You have to simply exchange the objective and buy yourself a replacement one. So problem number 6. That's even worse than the other one. How do you like getting mounting medium on the objective? Sometimes people confuse immersion oil and mounting medium. That's a bad one if you confuse it. But it happened to me as well. And I'll tell you how this happened. It happens because of impatience. And you have to be careful here. What did I do? I made myself a permanent mount. I used UPROL mounting medium, which takes several weeks to completely dry. And some of the mounting medium actually spilled out from beneath the cover glass. And it was therefore higher than the cover glass. And because of the small distance between the objective and the microscope slide, I actually managed to dip the front part of the objective into the mounting medium. I panicked, really. I immediately took the objective out. I screwed it out and using some solvent, I carefully cleaned the objective, because if it turns hard, then you've got really a problem, because it's going to be very difficult to remove. It can happen. Happened to me. And for this reason, because we don't want that this happens in an educational setting, like in the school where I work, for example, in this case, we have removed all of the immersion oil and all of the mounting media, and we're not using these things at all. We're just using dry objectives. So let's continue. Mistake number 5, using the coarse focus knob with the high power objectives. Also something you shouldn't be doing. Many microscopes have 2 focus knobs, a coarse and a fine focus knob, and the coarse focus knob should only be used with a 4 times objective, and the fine focus knobs can be used with all objectives, of course, but you should never use the coarse focus knob with the high power objectives, because you simply risk crashing the objective into the slide. You don't want that. It's bad for the slide, it's bad for the objective. Some objectives have a front part, they're spring loaded. So they have a spring loaded front part, and this means that the front part retracts. So this is a protective mechanism. But still, if you continue to rotate the coarse focus knob, then you're actually going to do some damage. So mistake number 4. Spinning the find focus knob when focus is lost. I've also seen this, that sometimes people completely lose the focus, and what they do is they try to find the focus by rapidly spinning the find focus knob, and that's also not really meaningful. Because it simply takes a long time, and you're much faster by rotating the 4 times low power objective into position and then starting all over again. It's going to be a much faster method of finding the focus than just trying it by random, by trial and error, and by spinning the find focus knob into one direction 15 times, and then you cannot find the focus, so you spin it back again, and then you turn it into the other direction 15 times. No. It's not a good idea. Mistake number 3, starting to observe with the condenser all open. Basically, it's like this. When you start to find the focus of a specimen using the low power objective, close the condenser all the way. The reason is that this gives you not only the highest contrast, but also the largest depth of field. The resolution might be lower, but that's okay. You just want to have a very high contrast in order to make focusing much easier. And when everything is in focus and everything is centered, then you can switch to the next higher magnification. But I would not open the condenser. Also, maybe because if the light is too bright at the beginning, then it might hurt your eyes. Yeah? But finding the center of the specimen and the correct focus at first, close the condenser, makes life much easier. So mistake number 2, keeping your microscope not covered. This will collect dust, and sometimes quite a lot of it. So make sure that, you vacuum clean your room frequently where you have your microscope, put a dust cover on top of it. Dust is almost not avoidable. The dust is so ubiquitous, can be found everywhere. Very difficult, if not impossible to avoid. But you can at least reduce the buildup of dust on the microscope. My recommendation is that if you have dust on the microscope, use either a dust brush, or use compressed air, but do not use those compressed air cans that also contain this kind of solvent. Sometimes they are sold for cleaning computer keyboards or so, but you should not use those solvent containing ones to remove dust, because there is a residue that might deposit on the microscope, and it's generally also not good, because due to the evaporation it really cools down and very quickly, and it might not be good for the glass elements either. Yeah? Mistake number 1, turning the microscope on with the lamp set too high. So this is actually mostly a problem with microscopes that have a halogen light bulb. And let's say you have turned the light intensity all the way to high, and then you switch the microscope off, and the next person who switches it on will receive very bright light, but maybe only for the fraction of a second, because usually this is the time when the light bulb starts to break and burn out. When a lamp halogen, so I'm not talking about LEDs. LEDs are pretty insensitive in this respect, but halogen bulbs are quite sensitive, and when you have a cold halogen bulb and when you turn on the light, then the resistance is quite low, and therefore there's a high current flowing through the halogen bulb, and this might actually break it. This is, by the way, the reason why most of the traditional lamps that we've used, why they break when you switch them on. The reason is that they're still cold. So always turn down the microscope lamp. Also prevents some eye damage if you have a very strong microscope lamp, and it goes from 0 all the way to maximum, and then you're blinded. So I would say that make sure that the lamp setting is always low. Yeah, so basically I'm down to problem number 1. So these were 10 issues that I sometimes find when people are not quite familiar with microscopes yet. Yeah, so I think I'm going to leave it at that now. I wish you all the best. I wish you happy microbe hunting as always, and see you around next time. Bye bye.